Good morning, everyone. Thank y'all for joining us for our Beef Brunch educational series webinar. I'm sorry for the technical difficulties we had going for just a second. My name is Ashley Edwards, and I'll be hosting for y'all today. We have Mr. Andrew Granger as our speaker. Andrew serves as an extension agent. He's based out of Vermillion Parish, but covers a few different parishes in that area. Today, he's going to be talking about pre-weaning management strategies for your calves. Just a few notes before we get started. Your microphones are muted. We're going to keep them that way throughout the entire webinar. I'm sorry if you can hear the mower going in the background. This is not going well today. If you are joining us on our Teams app or link, you can enter your questions into the Q&A box at any point during the presentation. If you've called in and are listening to us, you can text your questions to me. My number is 512-818-5476. So again, if you're calling in, you can text questions to me throughout the webinar. That number is 512-818-5476. In the interest of time, we are going to wait and answer your questions at the end of the presentation. So Andrew, I think you should be set to go. Thank you for being with us this morning, and I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you.
Thank you, Ashley. It's a pleasure to be here with you this morning, and certainly an honor to make a presentation to the group. We're going to talk about pre-weaning calf management. Some of the, many of us calve a little bit earlier in the spring, and some of these management practices probably already should have been done. But certainly we can help ourselves by not only having healthier calves, but putting more money in our pocket through proper pre-weaning calf management. Our goal should be certainly to add some pounds to those calves. The heavier they are, usually the more money we make, and so adding pounds is certainly one thing that we want to do. We also want to make our cattle acceptable to consumers, to customers that are buying our cattle. We want our cattle to be sought after, and over time in the industry, maybe we can build up a set of people looking for our particular calves. Certainly, we want to raise a healthy calf, and there's some things we need to be concerned about as far as health is concerned with these cattle, and in particular with a younger calf. Weaning should also be one of our goals, and certainly we'll talk a little bit about weaning this morning as well. If you want to add pounds, there's a couple of things that are easy to do, are cost effective, and add that extra weight on our cattle. Both of these practices have been proven to add weight to cattle. The first one I'll talk about is implantation with some sort of growth stimulant. The most common ones are probably Ralgro and Synovex C, but there are a number of them. Not all of them are labeled for calves, but there are a number of them that you can look to. This is probably one of the practices that your return on investment is the greatest. For a $2 implant, we can see a 5%, and actually most studies show about a 5% weight gain on those calves just from that implantation, from one implantation to a young calf. 5%, on a 500-pound calf, that's 25 pounds. At $2 a pound, that's $50 extra per calf. Certainly, that's nothing to scoff at, and something that we all ought to be looking at. Now, you say, well, not most people don't want to. Most of the consumers are not interested or don't want to eat cattle that have been implanted. But the fact of the matter is, unless you're involved with some sort of natural conditioning or natural selling of calves, some sort of a system where you're getting paid for not implanting your cattle, then you need to go ahead and implant your cattle. The illustration there shows where it's done. It's fairly easy to do, and you need to go ahead and try to get that done, especially if you're not in some natural marketing program. Now, the other thing that will add weight to your calves pretty easily is a deworming. There was a study done at Rose Pine several years ago that showed that what they did was they wormed cattle, had groups of cattle that were wormed at different months during the summer, and then cattle that were wormed every time that the worming was conducted. They did it in June, July, August, and September before selling those calves. The results of the study showed that a single worming in July was just about the same as worming a calf multiple times during the summer. And so what I took from that is if we can worm our calves in July, at one time in July, we'll get that added weight gain that they claimed. And so two easy practices that add pounds to your cattle and certainly should be considered if you want to maximize your income. We also want to try to make our cattle acceptable to our customers. We want our cattle to be sought after. Some of those things that you need to do to get your calves right and to make the most money for your calves are listed there for you. Castration is probably the one thing that we ought to do to all of our bull calves. Castration results in about a 3 to 5 cent per pound increase at sale time on 500-pound calves. Now, they don't really care too much if your calves are less than 500 pounds, but if we're weaning off 5-weight cattle or 6-weight cattle, it gets to be very important to have those calves castrated. Certainly, knife cut is kind of the industry standard, but most buyers will accept banded calves as well. Dehorning has certainly something that you should do. A dehorned calf is probably worth a 2 cents more per pound at time of sale. But if you're going to dehorn calves, then you need to be concerned about a couple of different things. Heat, you don't want to you're going to be dehorning calves in late spring usually. Excuse me. And you need to be concerned about a hot part of the day in particular. You need to do this either early in the morning, but I prefer it late in the afternoon when that calf has overnight to cool off from the stress of dehorning. Rain can also be an issue when you dehorn calves and it rains that day. We've seen some issues with infections on those horns and whatnot. So don't do it on a rainy day. Give it time to close up before training. We've come under some pressure to use nerve blocks or some sort of you use a nerve block to prevent pain when you are dehorning, and so this should be considered. It's fairly easy to do. Lidocaine is the drug of choice for that, and you certainly should try to consider it. They have shown some increases in weight gain on cattle that were given a nerve block during dehorning, and then also giving some sort of a pain relief analgesic after dehorning. Those cattle tend to perform a little bit better. Vaccinations also need to be carried out on calves. A couple of different reasons, not only for customer acceptance, they're pretty much demanding that we give virus complex and pastorella vaccines to our calves before they're weaned to get that resistance started at that time. And it certainly is it certainly makes sense to me to do that. But also these vaccinations can help with some of the health of the calves while they're still on their mamas. So certainly you might want to look at that. Certainly the virus complex, you want to use a modified live virus injection, and also pastorella pneumonia vaccine should be given as well. Weaning your cattle, 45-day weaning before you sell, or before those cattle are delivered, is an option, something you need to look at. You need to put a pencil to this. If you're going to feed a calf for 45 days after weaning, you're going to have significant cost. If you can't find some cheap supplement out there, either a byproduct feed or whatnot that will do the job for you, then it gets to be concerning with these high-priced feeds that we're seeing right now. But certainly something that you need to look at from an economic standpoint. You should get a higher price for your calves if they've been weaned for 45 days. So it's something to be considered before sale. Again, look at the economics of it before you do it. We want to raise healthy calves, and certainly we need to watch for certain things. and then take some make some management decisions and do some management practices to help concern it. One thing that we see a lot of, or is frequently seen, is a navel ill, a swollen navel. You need to feel it, you need to palpate it to make sure that it's not, a hernia. Umbilical hernias can occur and do occur by feeling. If you feel the, some of the intestine coming through the body wall, then it's probably a hernia, and you should probably wait and see how that, because oftentimes that gut will retract back into the stomach and close off and be kind of cure itself. But if it starts to really swell big and it's a hernia, it may be worth your while. These calves are worth money. It may be worth your while to get a veterinarian out there and repair that hernia. If it's hot and seems to be closed off from the body cavity, then it's might be an infection. Could be truly navel ill. Navel ill also affects the joints on these calves. The joints will swell and the calf will become somewhat lame. Won't want to move around. And you have an infection, and antibiotics are certainly need to be used. So infection versus hernia, swollen navel, you need to look at that. We see that frequently in our calves. Scours, calf scours can be a huge problem. Probably the best management practice is to for the first 30 days of the calving season or 20 days of the calving season, have your cows on one pasture. Leave the cows that are calved there on that same pasture and move the expectant mothers. Another 10 days goes by, or 30 or 15 days goes by, then you'd move those cows that haven't calved onto another pasture. Now you need several pastures, you need the space to do it, but if you're having trouble with calf scours, it can be a yearly occurrence. You need to use some sort of method about spreading those cattle out and letting them calve on cleaner pasture as the season goes on. And it's worked very well in the sandhills, is where they develop that, and it works really, really well. It makes a lot of sense. Summer pneumonia can be a problem in some herds, especially if it's recurring. You need to try and take steps on that. The mother's immunity comes through the colostrum to the calf, and that's usually good for about 3 months. It'll last about 3 months in a calf, and so pneumonia may break sometime after that. That immunity from if the calf got a good dose of colostrum, that immunity is very effective against pneumonias. But something you might want to consider is an early vaccination with some of the modified live virus vaccines. It gives a bigger, causes a larger antibody response than the kill products. I know you're worried about pregnant cows or whatever, maybe by that time, but I like modified live throughout the life of the cattle, and after a while, those young heifers you're buying as replacement or keeping as replacement, you need to use modified live on them, and then you won't need to worry about problems with the vaccine causing abortion. Clostridium is something that kind of gets on the back burner sometimes, and then you all of a sudden have an outbreak and you didn't vaccinate for blackleg. You need to stay on top of that. And continue Clostridium vaccines are very, very inexpensive. Boosting the cows, even cow herd, that'll give you that immunity from the colostrum, but also the calves need to be vaccinated on a regular basis. Weaning can be a strategic type weaning, is what I'm more going to talk about now, but also you want to use a weaning process that is the least stressful as possible. There's several reasons for early weaning, and early weaning can work. Drought is probably our biggest reason for early weaning. When getting those cows, if you have a shortage of forage, shortage of grass, to get those calves off those cows does them a lot of good. Reduces their nutrient requirements considerably, and so drought would be a reason to early wean. But also, a poor milker. If you have a cow, I know that she should be on the cull list for sure, but it's better to have some calf than no calf. And if you're culling some of your open cows and want to maintain the size of your herd, then poor milkers may stay in your herd a couple of years if that's the case. And if she's weaning off a kind of a doggy calf every year, then her calves would be in line for an early weaning to get those calves some nutrition, get them up to speed with the rest of the calves. We can do that fairly inexpensively to feed those young calves because they are more they gain more weight on less feed. They're more efficient, and so it might make sense to wean those little bit doggier calves based upon the milking ability of their mothers. Also, the visual that you see before you shows lactation, or how the lactation curve, and within about 10 weeks, you probably can do better with feed. Again, if you've got some calves that are later born, maybe, or you're getting into late lactation and some of your calves are not doing as well as the others, they may be considered for an early weaning and put on some feed to try to get that calf crop more uniform, to try to bring those smaller calves up to some of the other ones. And even just as a case of maybe some creep feeding, we can do better late than the mama can with a little bit of feed. As far as weaning calves in as friendly a way as possible, fence line weaning works very, very well. You need good fences. You probably should have an extra pasture for those calves set aside where they've got some summer grasses that have built up or whatnot. And so, and then you also should probably supply some hay and maybe a little bit of feed to those calves and get them to start eating well and getting used to being their mama on one side of the fence. They don't tend to bawl so well, and they usually go to feed a little bit quicker because they're not missing their mamas. That two-step flap weaning type system that I don't have a picture of, but you insert a flap on the nose and it prevents the calf from nursing. You do that, wait about 7 days, and then you remove the flap. Of course, you have to catch the calves twice to do it. So that's a little bit of a problem, but many have reported excellent results with that. Basically, the calf weans himself over time and gets used to. It's kind of a two-step approach because first they do without milk, but mama's right there, and then finally the second phase is there. You can just take them off the mamas completely. After about 7 or 8 days, remove the flap and remove them from the mamas. So. Weaning is a critical time, probably the most stressful time in a calf's life, especially if you wean and put them on a truck and bring them to town. That really doubles up on the stress on these young calves. So finding an easier way to wean makes a lot of sense. So that's pretty much my presentation this morning on calf management. We want to increase our income by gaining extra weight, by making our cattle more valuable to our buyers. We want our calves to be sought after because they are healthy and because they have all the things that those buyers are looking for, and that they perform later on. Health of a calf crop is really very important, especially if you're seeing some issues with scours or with pneumonia. You certainly can lose a lot of money without taking care of the health of these calves. And then look for ways to wean calves in a humane system as possible. So, are there any questions?
Thank you. So I don't see any questions right now, but again, y'all that are live with us, you can enter questions into the Q&A box. We'll give y'all a little bit of time to do that. If you've called in, you can text those questions to me. That number is 512-818-5476. Andrew, since we're waiting on that, you mentioned earlier, you talked about the implants and said, they work great. And, I'm an advocate for implanting as long as you're not selling to a market that requests that you don't use them. But I guess, do you have any advice or tips for these guys as we move forward and we talk about marketing? You did a great job touching on some ways that they can manage these calves to save money and things like that. But as they go forward and they look at marketing them post-weaning, what suggestions do you have for them?
Well, first I would suggest that we need to do a better job of educating the public. A calf that's been implanted has a minuscule amount of once you go through the period, or is that most of these implants have 100-day, 120-day time window, and then once they're past that window, there's just a very little amount of hormone compared to some of the other things that people eat. Soybean oil is very high in estrogen. The complaint is that we're causing early puberty in girls and things like that. And really, it's kind of a conspiracy theory, if you want it in modern terms. If you really look at the numbers, they eat a lot of foods that are many more times more full of hormones than what these calves that have been implanted are. And so, and even if you don't implant, you're going to get some of these naturally occurring hormones when you eat the meat. So it's really, the threat is not there. But as far as marketing cattle what was the question? Marketing cattle that have been implanted?
Just marketing these calves in general. I mean, it's a tough year, and so how can they capitalize on the management strategies that they've used when it comes to turning around and marketing these later on?
Well, just adding weight by implanting and deworming is going to help you some, even if you're just going to the sale barn. But other than that, you need to look for groups if you can. We have a couple of 3 different groups here in this parish, and I know it's becoming more and more popular everywhere, where smaller cattle people are getting together so that they can deal in trailer load lots. That's really the way to be looking at it. I think this market's going to turn. I don't know when it's going to turn, but I think we're going to see some high-priced calves here. I think all the fundamentals say that. I know we've got issues with supply chain and the war in Ukraine and everything like that, and all those things play into our market. We don't want that to happen, but that's basically what happens. And so, but basically, I think the market's going to turn. But you need to try and market cattle in trailer load lots. I think that's the best way to do it. Also, there are some special sales that if you are vaccinating your calves and you are dehorning and castrating, there's some sales, and not so many here locally, but in Texas and Northeast Texas, there's some sales up there. And it may be worth your while to ship those calves to those sales to get if you're going to be doing these management practices, get paid for them in a better way. There are some 45-day wean calf sales even that are available to you. So find those things. If you have some questions about finding them, we have some information about where they're being held and how you get in on them. That would be also an alternative as opposed to finding a group to work with. You can still work by yourself like that. Did I answer your question, Ashley? I don't know.
Yes, sir, you did. And I think you hit the nail on the head when you said, you're doing these management strategies and you're putting this work into it. And so you should get paid for it. And so I hope that our producers do take the time to find those sales or find the people, like you said, to put load lots together and things like that, because everyone is working hard to produce good product, and you should get paid for the good product that you're producing. So I appreciate that. I don't see any other questions. So Andrew, thank you again so much for joining us this morning. Thank you all that jumped on earlier and were patient as we got through some of the technical difficulties that we were having. We will be posting this recording online within the next week or so. You can go to our channel on YouTube, which is LSU Ag Center -livestock. You can find it on the Beef Brunch webpage, which is lsuagcenter.com/Beef Brunch. It'll be under past webinars, and we'll have information on our future webinars on that website as well. If you have any questions regarding this webinar or the Beef Brunch series in general, you can contact me. I can forward those to Andrew as needed. My email is akedwards@agcenter.lsu.edu. Again, thank you all for joining us today, and we hope that you have a wonderful rest of the week.